When I was about 10 or 12, I don't really remember, I had this odd experience. At the time, I was sharing a room with my sister. We had lofted beds and I slept on the top bunk. We had a stereo, and when you'd press the button to turn it on, it would click and a red light would pop up. Our beds were on one side of the room, and the stereo was on a desk on the opposite side. One night, I was woken up by that click sound that the stereo makes when the power button is pressed. I recognized the sound and sat up in bed. I looked over at the stereo and the light blinks on. I looked down at my sister and she was fast asleep. Her bed was under mine, but perpendicular, so I could see the top half of her from my bed. The stereo was playing that white noise sound that it makes when there isn't a specific station on. Suddenly, I could hear someone saying, "Away," coming from the stereo, just one word, "away." First it started off soft, but gradually got louder and louder until it became a yell, "Away, away, away." It took about 10 to 15 seconds probably to build up to the yell, and then it died back down to a whisper. I thought it was a dream. I was frozen out of fear. I thought it had to be my imagination. And I tried telling myself that during the whole thing. I'd almost convinced myself of it until it stopped. After the voice died away, the stereo went back to static. Then I heard the familiar click, and the light turned off. I was positive I wasn't dreaming. That ending click, I stared at the stereo for a few more moments, too freaked out to move, looked back at my sister, and saw that she was still asleep. I finally lay back in bed, covered myself with my sheets, and willed myself back to sleep. I consider myself a rational person, but I have no rational explanation for this. Back in college, I would go home every other weekend to work at a job that I had since high school. I would drive directly from campus after my last class on Friday to my job, about an hour, and after my shift was done, I'd go back to my parents' house, which was in the middle of nowhere. My parents were almost never home when I got back from work though. They would often spend their Friday and Saturday evenings drinking like they were the ones in college. So the house was dark, and since it was mid-fall, so was the yard. I pulled into my normal parking spot, got out of the car, and turned to open the back door of the car to get my backpack out of the back seat. That's when I noticed the bathroom light was on. Was that light on when I pulled up? It must have been, right? As I was contemplating the light and reaching for my backpack, there was suddenly a very angry-looking old woman standing at the window staring at me. We're not talking resting bitch face here either. She was pissed off, and I knew it. We stood there staring at each other for a good 10 seconds when my parents pulled into the driveway and distracted me from my stare down with the woman in the bathroom. By the time I turned back, the light was still on, but the woman was gone. This happened when I was around 7 or 8 years old, so back in the early 2000s. My neighborhood was generally safe, except for the drunks and drunkies, but everyone knew everyone there, so I never felt scared to play out in the street. One evening, I was playing outside with my friend. She was kind of simple-minded and always had her head in the clouds, whereas I was always aware of bad men out here since an incident had happened to 2 family members of mine in a park a couple years prior to this. I noticed a man, maybe in his 50s, with glasses and a silver car parked outside an apartment building watching us. At first, I just assumed that maybe he was waiting to pick someone up, but he continued to stare at us. I told my friend to come and play somewhere else, so we did. And the silver car drove up and stopped to watch us again. Me and my friend kept moving around the street. It was a long neighborhood, but it was narrow, so there weren't a lot of places to go. But we kept moving, and so did the car. I knew it was around 7 o'clock p.m., and my mom worked until that time, so she would hopefully be heading our way soon. I was trying to keep my distance with this weirdo until she arrived down the street. My friend didn't know why we were moving and got annoyed, so we had an argument, and both stupidly went separate ways. I was aware of the creep watching us and just knew something wasn't right. And I never should have left her, but I stormed home in a bad mood, and the car followed my friend instead of me. I didn't go inside my house. Instead, I waited outside to see if the car would follow me, and that's when I noticed it followed her. And this time it pulled up beside her. My friend, being her, walked over to the car. I assumed he said something to her, and that's when I ran down to grab her. Maybe a stupid move, but she was my best friend, and I didn't want to see her get kidnapped. Luckily, my mom was walking down the hill at the end of our street when this is happening. I screamed for my mom, and the creep panicked and drove away as quick as lightning. Before even telling my mom what happened, she knew something was wrong with the way that guy took off like that. I still think about that day a lot, and I think what could have happened if I didn't notice the guy watching us, or if I hadn't grabbed my friend when I did, or my mom coming home when she did. Maybe nothing, but I remember feeling creeped out. At that age, I obviously didn't know what molestation and rape was at all, so I could never have imagined it then. But now, it gives me the shivers imagining what he could have had planned for us.